Hey everybody, TacticAngel back on the PlayStation 5 to take a look at another premium ship in World Warships Legends. This time we'll be looking at the Minegumo, a Tier 8 premium Japanese destroyer. For this review, I'll start with some history, talk about the ship in game before running down the stats, and then we'll jump into some gameplay. If you want to skip around, you should see some time codes in the description to help you out. 5 years ago, when I reviewed the Tier 6 Asashio, I mentioned that there were 10 ships in the Asashio class. Minegumo was ordered under the Circle 2 Supplementary Naval Expansion Program, and she was the last of the Asashios laid down in March 1937. She was launched in November that same year, and was the 8th put into commission in April 1938. Her first service saw her patrolling the Japanese coastline, which seems like it ought to have been pretty quiet duty, but in June 1941, while operating with Destroyer Division 41, the Minegumo collided with the Natsushio, which would have been bad enough, damaging her bow, but then became the middle car in a 3-car pileup when the Kurishio ran into her stern, which actually took her out of service until just before the attack on Pearl Harbor. And of course, those attacks included also everyone else who happened to share a border with Japan. In particular, Minegumo was part of Kondo's Southern Force, which was positioned to provide support for attacks against Malaya and the Philippines. She'd be more in the thick of things during the Battle of the Java Sea, where she'd engage the combined American, British, Dutch, Australian fleet, or ABDA, first contributing to a spread of 43 torpedoes, which hit nothing, and then moving to engage with HMS Encounter, Electra, and Jupiter, who were trying to protect the crippled Exeter. After Asagumo was badly damaged, Minegumo would swing in to protect her and help finish off the damaged HMS Electra. For Midway, she was back under the command of Nobutake Kondo, who was to lead the invasion force. After the disastrous carrier engagements that saw most of the Kido Butai sent to the bottom, she'd turned back without anything to show for her efforts. She was damaged a couple more times, first when she ran into a coral reef near the Truk Atoll, and after repair when operating as part of the Tokyo Express. She was one of several destroyers operating as high-speed transports when she was attacked from the air in October 1942. Repairs would stretch into February 1943 when she'd set off with Murasame for Rabaul. Along the way, the destroyers engaged a submarine, and it is believed that they sunk USS Grampus. The victory was short-lived because both destroyers were set upon by 3 Cleveland-class cruisers and 3 Fletcher-class destroyers. These were ships under the command of Rear Admiral Tip Merrill, to which the Grampus was also assigned. This was a relatively minor battle in the grand scheme of things, and equally one-sided. Shortly before 1 a.m. on March 6, 1943, the Americans opened fire on the 2 Japanese destroyers. Given how new radar-guided artillery was at the time, all these shells came in at the Murasame. A few salvos later, it was crippled by 6-inch shell fire, and then a torpedo from USS Waller would send her to the bottom. Minegumo, for her part, tried to return fire, but was quickly gunned down by the combined cruiser and destroyer task force before they were forced to fall back to avoid Japanese shore artillery. As for Minegumo in-game, she's a little like Asashio. For one, she looks exactly like her minus the camo. She also shares the same AA defense, which I'm sure will come up later. But on top of having some familiar consumables listed here, there's actually quite a bit of difference in how she engages with ships at her tier. For one, Minegumo has a better reload than you'd expect out of a Japanese destroyer. That's pretty good when you consider that Japanese destroyer guns actually tend to do good damage when you do connect, and I assume that's why this is on screen. You get both that and some high damage torpedoes, and she can fire them single file. That gives you a lot of utility to really make the most out of each torpedo, and you can use both of these pretty openly, just like Royal Navy destroyers, because you also come with many fast recharging short duration smoke screens, which will allow you to dip into cover to do damage or to avoid paying the full penalty for some of those mistakes you've made. And you really do have the ability to control a lot of those mistakes because Minegumo is indeed pretty stealthy. Pretty much every bit as stealthy as a torpedo boat, even if she totally isn't one of those. On the downside, what Minegumo runs into is effectively that if you don't fire the torpedoes one at a time, the spreads are very, very wide, and the reload is pretty unforgiving. You do have a torpedo reload booster, which makes that more manageable when you do really need it. For whatever advantage you might feel with the stealth on this ship, it's at the expense of any other sort of defense. You have pretty low HP and the worst AA of any ship at tier 8. Also, if you think the improved gun performance makes you a top shelf knife fighter, that's not really going to be the case at all. You're more of a fire starter and competent gunboat, but you're not about to dethrone any of those top contenders for the tier 8 destroyer that you wouldn't want to be stuck in a small dark room with. Folks who are going to enjoy the Minegumo are people who really can't figure out if they want to play a Japanese destroyer or a Royal Navy one. As long as you don't envision that hybrid as having sonar, then this ship ought to be a welcome addition to your port, as long as you like tier 8. It's still not a top shelf gunboat for winning those knife fights with others, but that would be nothing new to you as either a Japanese or a British ship. Others might be content just to have a couple of reload boosters and the single launch idea. If you're unwilling to use the smoke and the guns for offensive purposes though, there are probably better torpedo boats out there for you, but then again, you can earn this for free. As we go deeper into the actual stats though, keep in mind that what you're going to be seeing on screen are base statistics, except as otherwise noted. As far as survivability, it could be better. 17,400 hit points is solidly below average. 13 to 20 armor isn't going to help either, but it's not going to make much of a difference. This is a destroyer, so it's going to take overpens from battleships, and it's going to eat a ton of damage from HE cruisers and HE destroyers, maybe even AP. You have no torpedo defense, so every shot is going to do damage unless you're oversaturated. When we start looking at artillery, Minegumo comes in with 3 twin turrets in a 1 forward and 2 to the rear configuration. That is pretty common to most Japanese destroyers. That makes her better at engaging in a kiting position rather than hunting. Her guns have a swift 4-second reload and put out a healthy 2000 HE damage. More importantly, Minegumo comes in with a 9% fire chance, which means you've got a pretty good fire chance for a destroyer with single salvos as well as over time. In fact, you're tied for 3rd place with Hayate, though you are slightly behind that ship for DPM. Range in Minegumo is as short as they come on a tier 8 destroyer, though you do share that with all sorts of other ships. If you switch over to AP, the 2400 AP damage is a bit below average, and when you work it out with your rate of fire, it's a total normal DPM. Torpedoes are the other interesting thing with Minegumo because, on the one hand, having 2 sets of 4 is pretty standard, but there are some downsides. For one, if you do launch these in a group, they have a very wide spread. On the other hand, if you can aim them appropriately, they're really, really dangerous. The 9-kilometer range is a bit below average. 75 knots is good though, and with their sea detectability though, they do tend to be more noticeable, 10% more reaction time than normal. Hits can do upwards of nearly 21,000 damage without upgrades. That's a lot, and second only to Hayate and Yugumo. The 130-second torpedo reload is pretty darn long, which gives you an on-paper damage over time that is not very good. But that is not uncommon for ships that can fire single-file torpedoes. Obviously, if you hit all your torpedoes, this is a really, really powerful setup, and there are other advantages we're going to talk about in just a minute. As we come to AA though, Minegumo has the same AA characteristics as Asashio, which is both 2 tiers down and notably the worst defended ship at tier 6. So, not to belabor the explanation here, Minegumo has little to no AA, and if you're a carrier, you should do your best to kill this with fire. Or torpedoes, because AP bombs really don't work, but it's not going to fight back. And strangely, I'll also point out that your maneuverability in Minegumo is the same as Asashio. Unfortunately for Minegumo, where Asashio is not bad at tier 6, this ship is nearly 3 knots slower than normal at tier 8. And if you think a ship like Kitakaze feels like driving a barge, which I do, that ship is 1 knot faster than Minegumo, though the 640 meter turning circle is very, very good, as is the rudder. Then the concealment in-game ends up being in a pretty decent position. You're 300 meters better than average, though you have given up 100 meters to Asashio. Effectively, this ship has the same in-game detectability characteristics as Hayate, and it's pretty good but not incredible. Your consumables are going to go a long way towards making the rest of what we've just talked about work. After we sail by the normal damage control party, we arrive at your smoke screens. You start with 6 of them, and you'll notice that the dispersion and duration times are very low. If you were to look at a stock Jutland, these are all the same as you'd find on that ship. That means they're low commitment and easy to use in order to turn out and to get away, and they're going to help you supplement your good but not great gun performance, particularly where it comes to stopping and harassing capital ships. Your engine boost is, again, the Acme variety with 8% boost for 2 minutes and then the standard 3-minute recharge. After that, you have every fishmonger's favorite, the torpedo reload booster. These will drop your reload to just a few seconds, no matter what your reload is at the time you pick it. But then you do have to wait 6 minutes, and then you'll get a second one back. Asashio only got 1 of these, so if you played that, you effectively have one that you can use whenever it seems opportune, and then a second to have towards the end of the game. You know, if you live that long. Anyway, we're going to be on Tears of the Desert. I'm obviously going to be in Minegumo. I'll go ahead and probably check right at the beginning of the game what we've got against us. We're paying especially good attention to the destroyers. I'll put my commander up on the screen. I will say that when I ran this as a gunboat, primarily, I got a little bit too ahead of myself most of the time. If I ran this as a torpedo boat, I had pretty similar results, if only because I was not as confident, and not being as confident is sometimes not a bad thing. In this case, because we've got the 1 turret on the front and the 2 turrets on the back, sometimes TacticAngel makes mistakes. He's, whatever. Anyway, we're trying to run this as a gunboat. The torpedo range is not great. At this point, I think I'm actually checking Discord until I hear the ship starting to beep. I turn to the left. We dodge the island deftly. I wish I could tell you that I'm just trying to avoid torpedo shot at the location of the enemy ship, because I'm pretty sure he'd still be aiming at the corner here. Double checking our map, and we're gonna call out a couple of possibilities. Now, I will say, if you do have a torpedo reload booster and you do want to get out in front of the damage game, sometimes it's not a bad idea to throw out torpedoes at the beginning of the game in a speculative manner, because you can effectively chuck 9-kilometer torpedoes out there and not have to really worry about reload, because there you go. We hit the reload booster. A couple seconds later, we're all ready to go. If we want to go all the way in, we can immediately launch several more torpedoes. Unfortunately, right as we do that, we spot the Jutland. We have absolutely no pride in this engagement, so we're going to go ahead and immediately use our smoke screen. He's doing about the same. We are getting the better of him in terms of damage over time. But as soon as you see us leaving that smoke screen, we're going to stop shooting at him. Our engine is still pretty messed up. The Zeton is obviously kind of going ham, as you might expect. And we're falling back at this point. Now, there is the possibility that we could shoot at the Zeton. That said, if we get spotted from around our smoke screen, that's not great, because That puts us in a position where the Zetan is going to start shooting secondaries at us. You can already see he's shooting secondaries at a much less vulnerable target. Unfortunately, it has also just gone down. And we also have this Vladivostok in the back. He's charging forward. And you can see, if you get a little bit too out in front of your torpedo reload booster, you can end up with these situations where you have the long 130-second modified torpedo reload. We're counting down. We got about 10 seconds left. Now this is actually going to end up getting the Vladivostok pretty much to full speed. And what I'm going to do is release a set of torpedoes. And we start at the beginning, like the furthest out we expect him to be, and work backwards with the single shot torpedoes. That way, if he does detect the torpedoes and slows down, he's still probably going to hit a couple of them at least. In this case, he doesn't quite react in enough time. All 4 of them land body shots against him. We dev strike the Vladivostok. That's pretty good. And that's one of the chief advantages that you get with Minegumo. If you do start landing torpedoes like that, and you can be doing that from a little bit closer in, then it's a really, really powerful ship, even if this isn't necessarily on paper a torpedo boat. The Jutland more or less spots us at about the same time we spot it. We're at a bit of a disadvantage. We're going to go ahead, and since we've got that quick smoke, use this smoke to disengage. We've got the second set of torpedoes. We're going to throw it out there because this is going to confound his ability to engage us. You do see we have been sonarred for a second there. We get unsonarred. He's already trying to dodge the torpedoes. Dodging torpedoes and shooting at somebody at the same time. I don't know if you're a human or not. I hope, probably. It's not the easiest thing to do. We put out our fire and restore our turret at the same time so that we can go ahead and finish off the fight. We do that. We've only got 3,300 hit points left, which is not great, but we have 3,362 more hit points than we actually need in order to continue the game, which is perfectly acceptable. Actually, you can start losing modules at this point, and as long as you're in the game, you're still contributing. But we've got everything going for us. We've got 4 smoke screens. We've got 2 consumables that are waiting on recharge. We got, let's be honest, about 75,000 damage. That's not terrible. We're going to go ahead, cap a base. That's our job. We're a pretty stealthy destroyer. There are no destroyers left on the enemy team. So we should be able to get this pretty easily. And as you can see, everybody else on our team is moving towards their respective caps or sweeping back towards the middle because they have abandoned B. It's fine. It doesn't. In this case, it doesn't matter. It's always annoying when it does. So we're going to make sure to go ahead and get this while we're here. Now, I will say one thing. If you looked at the Jutland has 2 advantages against us. And the Jutland's not an incredible knife fighter. The Jutland has sonar, which is okay, but it's not like German sonar. Most Germans that have sonar have 2 guns on the back and 1 on the front, just like us. Most English ships or British ships have 2 guns on the front, at the very least, and probably 1 gun on the back, unless you're the Druid, which is, I mean, when's the last time you saw that? But point is, one ship is more offensively capable and 1 is more defensively capable. And what we're doing right now in engaging the Wisconsin is kind of in the middle of that. We've got a 45-degree angle on him. He's probably not going to prioritize us as his biggest problem. You know, we're a destroyer that's 8.5 kilometers away from him. He can only intermittently see us. And I think if I'm looking at the mini, yeah, there we go. We hit an island, so like, fine. It is what it is. We hit an island. It actually helps us slow down, and we use the center island here and continue to whittle away with our HE. He's got 3 fires going on him. We'll go ahead and let him burn as we maneuver to get back into B. Now, B is probably not something that we actually need, but we are a destroyer, so we might as well go ahead and take it. And that extra 30,000 damage or so we did without any response. And that's one of the things Minegumo is pretty good at. If you get in a position where you can shoot at a ship and there's no spotting mechanic that can get back at you, you've got smoke. If you've got the spots, you can go ahead and just fire away. That's something you can't do in something like Hayate. It is something you can do with British ships, but most British ships don't have the sort of HE damage potential that you'll find out of a Japanese ship. After we cap the base, then there's almost nothing for us to do here other than shoot our guns. We go ahead and open up on the DZP. DZP because 7 is spelled with a Z in Dutch. And he is being spotted by somebody else, but thankfully we managed to gun him down. Finish off the game with a pretty good result. So closing thoughts on Minegumo. I probably wouldn't call it a bad ship, though I probably wouldn't say it's a particularly great ship either. I don't often think I want to play a Royal Navy ship with most of its guns on the back. I'll follow Admiral Nelson and of course this guy, who I assume is probably one of his descendants. And for me, Hayate is probably just a little more my speed, just for the extra HE damage and extra HP. Then the speed and the AA are just icing on the cake. This isn't my favorite destroyer. I don't dislike it at all either. When I get into these middle ships, I kind of resort to playing this like a European destroyer with smoke if I'm playing it smart, relying on damage over time and being just generally annoying. And I have no idea why that never occurs to me in a Royal Navy ship, but those are just my thoughts. Let me know what yours are down in the comments, and of course, I'll see you on the next one.